Good.
Yep, we're recording.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a regularly scheduled meeting of the Montclair Planning Board. Notice of this meeting is being given by posting on the township website, also by providing a copy of the posting on the first floor of the municipal building, by publishing the notice in a local newspaper designated for public notices, and we also have already said that we put it on the front door, so I think that's it. The meeting is being broadcast live on Channel 34 and is being streamed live on YouTube. This is a quasi-judicial proceeding, meaning that the board has powers and procedures that resemble a court of law, and we are obligated to objectively determine facts and to draw conclusions from them in order to provide the basis for official action. Any questions or comments that are directed to the board should be limited to those questions or comments that the board can legally consider in reaching a decision, and decorum appropriate for a courtroom is expected to be maintained at all times. This evening we have at least one application on the agenda. When the attorney for the applicant makes his presentation, he will provide into evidence for the board to hear certain facts and information. The board will have an opportunity to examine this witness after the applicant's attorney presents his testimony, and then the public will get a chance to ask that witness questions with respect to what he has testified to this evening. And we will proceed that way through the witnesses that the applicant presents, at the conclusion of which the public will have the opportunity to make a statement one way or the other with respect to the application as a whole. We find that this operates best for us in terms of efficiency, and we would ask that anyone who wishes to speak this evening adhere to that procedure. First thing on our agenda this evening is our roll call, and I am here.
Vice Chair Brodock.
I'm here.
Mr. Graham is excused. Mr. Ianwali.
Here.
Ms. Lockman.
Here.
Mr. Ortiz.
Here.
Mr. Pierre.
Present.
Counselor Schlager is excused. Ms. Willis is excused. Chair Nguyen is here. Mr. Jacobson.
I am here.
Mr. Neiman.
Here.
Mr. Neese.
I'm here.
And Mr. Berry.
I am here.
We have minutes from our October meeting.
We've received changes to the minutes from Ms. Lockman and Vice Chair Brodock. Are there any other changes? Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
All right, we have a resolution for 82 Pine Street.
And I believe we have changes to the resolution from Vice Chair Brodock and Ms. Lockman as well, I believe. No, just Vice Chair Brodock, okay.
I got off easy this time.
Are there any other changes to the resolution? Is there a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
Okay, and then we have a request for an extension on application for 98 Watchung Avenue.
Okay, I believe that we have Mr. Staley and Mr. Trembulac here.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm appearing this evening, Alan Trembulac. I'm appearing on behalf of Class 6 Reborn LLC. Sitting to my right is William Staley, who's the principal owner of Class 6 Reborn, longtime Montclair resident, company that's been involved in custom contracting projects, residential construction and renovation projects, mostly in Montclair for a number of years. 2013, this board granted site plan approval for the old Zimmerman Oil building on 98 Watchung Avenue, which is on the other side of the railroad trestle, the last building in the neighborhood commercial zone before you get to the residential houses on Watchung Avenue. The site plan approval was amended in 2018. 2019, Mr. Staley applied for a building permit towards the end of the year. Could not be processed because he hadn't yet obtained county planning board approval, which was required because Watchung Avenue being a county road. Before he could get around to filing that, COVID hit in early 2000, and that basically delayed him going forward with the project. I think I should point out that when the application was approved, it was a totally conforming site plan. No variances were required. I don't think there's been any relevant changes to the zoning requirements for the NC zone that would affect this project. So, I mean, if we had to refile the application to extend the approval, basically it would be another conforming site plan application. We're hoping not to do that. Mr. Staley fully intends to go forward with this project within the next year. The purpose of the approval was to allow him to convert this existing building to basically a home for his contracting business. So again, we're seeking a one-year extension of the site plan. We're able to go forward with this project as approved within the next year.
Sounds like the only question is whether or not we have the discretion to do that, given the current laws.
You mean with the Permit Extension Act, as we experienced in one of our September meetings?
Yes.
Honestly, I think the time has rung, unless Mr. Chermilak, you can fashion an argument. First of all, it was minor site plan, and as you say, if there have been no substantial or material changes to the zoning ordinance, whether the board grants an extension or not is almost irrelevant.
Well, the approval, I mean, right, there's a misconception that site plan approval expires. It doesn't expire, but what expires is the immunity or protection the applicant has from future zoning changes that could impact the project. There haven't been any, and it's correct. I mean, if he were to, but again, we're just hoping to extend the immunity, if you will, for an additional year, at least until he can file a building permit application.
Do you know what your time frame is now? And do you have a new time frame?
Bill?
Obviously, we're contractors as well, so we would be doing this work ourselves.
Is your microphone on, Mr. Staley? I'm just not sure.
Is it
I'm
light up?
supposed to talk, but I
There you go.
Yeah.
So we would be our own general contractors for this, and I think, as you're probably all aware, it's been a crazy time in the construction industry, but things are settling down now, and so we would be in a position to be able to do this within the next year.
And I was just speaking to Mr. Staley. He does need to file for county site plan approval, which I can help him get that done very quickly. And then once you have the county approval, I think you would just need to submit a building permit application or resubmit what you submitted before COVID.
Right.
Again, Mr. Chairman, I think our problem is that we only have but so much authority to extend our approvals. And if I'm understanding our attorney correctly, this is beyond our authority to grant approval.
Well,
And as much as we would like to, just like you're trying to conform with the letter of the law to get our approval, extended, because, even though you could go ahead and build and, you probably wouldn't have an issue. We don't have any, I don't think if you got to it within, a short period of time, I don't think there's anything in the pipeline that would change any of the code that would impact your client's property. But just like you're trying to comply, I mean, we only.
No,
we
I
have limits
understand.
too. So, I think as much as we would like to, I certainly have no problem with it. I don't think we can, because we don't have the authority to.
I didn't do a thorough analysis of the impact of the Permit Extension Act, and again, the site plan was amended in 2018. I think that starts the clock running again on the
But
approval.
I think even, see, we went through this, as Mr. Neese pointed out, we went through this a couple of meetings ago, and I think there was a limited time period that after the restrictions were lifted, you had a limited amount of time, and it's been over a year. And I know it wasn't more than a year, I don't remember whether it's 6 months or a year, but it's been more than a year since the restrictions were lifted, because we had the same issue with the other application that we had.
And the DRC resolution says the applicant must continue to meet the conditions of approval granted by the planning board on August 12, 2013.
Right. Well, the conditions still apply, certainly.
Right, so, and Mr. Tremolak, as I think you know, generally the statute says that the applicant was barred or prevented directly or indirectly from proceeding with the development because of delays in obtaining legally required approvals from the other governmental entities, and the developer applied promptly for and diligently pursued those approvals. That's the standard.
I think there's a separate standard that allows the board to grant up to 3 one-year extensions.
There is in 46.
Right. Yeah, regardless, but, and again, I didn't do the analysis, but the running of the time period was told during COVID, and I guess, when was the emergency lifted? Was it March of 2021? Because that's when the COVID, the Permit
Yeah,
Extension
I thought I
Act.
put that in my memo, but
Or maybe it was 2000, I think it was actually March of this year. Well,
No, it would have been, it wasn't this year, it was 2021, I know that.
But if I may say, aren't these extraordinary times? And especially as it pertains to a contractor, we all know how difficult contractors have had it over the past couple of years. We can't take something like that into account, or are we just strictly the letter of the law here?
Well, I'm sure you understand by sitting on this board as long as you have,
Mhm.
that we have limitations.
Yeah,
of what
we have no
can do,
leeway.
We can't do.
Mhm.
We can only do what the law allows us to do.
Yep.
And I think we pretty much established a couple of meetings ago that we did not have the ability to extend beyond what the law provided for any reason.
Mm.
I'm sympathetic to your situation too, but, we can't do two wrong things.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
you know.
Right?
I understand. I think we'll just have to hustle up and get the county approval and then submit for building
And Mr.
permits.
Tremolak, if you can find, some way to interpret the various regulations that impact this, that might allow this,
I
some
will
way
do
that we
that.
haven't thought about putting them together, certainly we would be open to reconsider.
Yeah, I understand. I will make an effort to put that together, and if I can make a compelling argument, we'll revisit this and submit another letter. But in the meantime, we'll look to get things moving forward and to submit a permit application while we're still protected. So,
Okay.
okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
And let's see, that brings us to a new application. for 602 Bloomfield Avenue.
Maybe Fred can do it for you, if you can't find it. What?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the board. My name is Siobhan Spillane Bailey from the law firm of Huntington Bailey. I'm appearing on behalf of the applicant, Mad Gardner LLC. This is an application for conditional use approval for the operation of a cannabis facility at 602 Bloomfield Avenue. The prior use was a flower shop. This is not dissimilar in product, but it is, and it's identical in intensity. The property is located in the C1 Central Business Zone where the proposed use is conditionally permitted. The property is also in the Town Historic District, and the applicant appeared before the HPC on September 15th, 2022. The application was viewed favorably with one recommendation to reuse limestone from the base to accommodate a new exit, which will be discussed by our architect. Our architect, Frank Cunha, is also here tonight to discuss the plans submitted with the application, with the understanding that the applicant will make a more formal submission once again to the HPC for any facade changes to the lighting, the entrance, or anything of that nature, signage. Though what is being proposed in any event will be shown to the board as well tonight. But we do understand we need to go back to the HPC before any of those changes would be implemented, assuming this board approves the conditional use. So I'll begin with one of the owners of Mad Gardner LLC, who will discuss the proposal and address some of the specific conditions of Montclair Code 347-17.2. And then we'll follow up by Frank Cunha, who will discuss the plans on file and address the buffer condition of the ordinance. So we'll begin with my client, if he wants to be sworn.
Howdy.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Yes. Nicholas Gunderson, Nicolas, and then Gundersen. Business affiliation is Mad Gardner LLC. Do you need my address as well?
Sure.
378 Elm Street, Sterling, New Jersey.
And I'm sorry, what is your role with the applicant?
I'm a owner.
Owner.
Yeah.
Or,
Member,
it's a,
LLC.
yes. Are you the managing member of the?
Yeah.
Okay,
I
thank
am
you.
managing member. Okay, just a member.
Just a member.
Sorry.
Why don't, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Mr. Niska.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'm a owner member of Mad Gardner LLC, and then our team also has experience, direct cannabis experience owning and operating retail stores, cultivation facilities, testing labs, and also the first shared use kitchen in California. Additionally, on our team is also a member of Montclair, or a business owner of Montclair, who has been a business owner since 1995 in town.
And tell us, do you have control of the site now? What is your relationship to 602 Bloomfield?
Yes. So currently, we have engaged in a lease agreement for site control of 602 Bloomfield Avenue.
So you're a current tenant there?
Yes, we are a current tenant, and just to kind of give you an idea of what the building is, it's this two-story commercial building with two storefronts on the first floor. One is currently being used as a paper store, kind of like a gift shop, and then we propose to be the store to the left of it, which we would operate in. Used to be, as Siobhan said, a former flower shop.
So let me just ask you, you already have signed a lease
Yes.
without knowing whether this will be approved or not?
Yes. Part of the.
Or that you'll be the the appointed
Correct,
licensee?
yes, because part of the, the application with the township is showing that we have site control.
Yeah, you have to show that you are currently in a lease, so that's the risk of the applicant here.
Mhm.
If they do not get their license, they've got a lease and they've got to do something else with it.
Okay, thank you.
What is the term of the current lease?
It's a one-year lease.
I think with the option to.
There are
extend.
options to extend and renew, but currently it's a one-year term. They're in probably 4 months into it, I would say. We
I
could,
think 4 months have
yeah,
gone by.
probably 4
around
months into
May.
the lease. Yes,
Yeah.
correct. But they're in a binding lease agreement.
Correct.
All right, and how will the establishment operate? And maybe you can walk us through and
Yeah.
use the architectural plans as you do that.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of talk about, do I need to grab a strap on the mic here?
There's a, no, let me turn the mic.
Sorry, I just want to. Check. Good? Okay. So I'm just going to walk you guys through the, kind of just the site in terms of how it's going to be run operationally. Frank is going to kind of go more into the architectural side of things, so I'm just talking purely from an operational point of view.
Before you start, do we need to mark this as an exhibit?
Actually, we should probably do the exhibits, period.
Okay. A1 is the application. A2 is the certification of taxes paid. A3 is the certification of publication. A4 is the affidavit of service. A5 is the survey prepared by Richard Hingos dated March 9th, 2021. A6 is a set of drawings prepared by FC3 Architecture and Design, revised through July 21st, 2022. A7 is the supplemental exhibit to the application, and A8 is the planning report dated August 24th, 2022.
All right. Thank you so much. All right. So just to get started.
And I apologize. Is this document that you are showing on the screen, is that part of what the board has received?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
It's A6.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I don't know the specific one, but yes, this is the floor plan layout that our lovely architect has drawn up. Thank you, Frank. So just to give you an idea, again, operationally of how this is going to be run, just very simply, customers are going to enter through the entrance ramp. This is the proposed extra entrance that we talked with the Historical Preservation Commission with. And the reason we're doing this is just to kind of increase flow. So our first landing point is going to be in the reception area where the first ID verification is going to happen. So part of selling cannabis in New Jersey, you need 2 points of ID verification. So this is going to be our first point of verification with the receptionist right there and a waiting area to prevent any spillover in the street. And then once they're permitted to enter, assuming there's enough vacancy, they're welcome to peruse the store, view our products such as flowers, oils, lozenges, such as your typical cannabis dispensary stock inventory of goods. So you peruse through the store, and then if you need help, you can ask a bud tender on the floor if you're looking for maybe a specific product or you're a little unaware of cannabis. And then you go to the POS counter where you'd then be verified again for the second time to ensure that you are 21 and up. After you're verified, you tell the person at the counter what you'd like. They give it to you, and then you make the purchase and then walk out through the exit door. Additionally, just some amenities that we do have is an ADA compliant bathroom for both employees and the general public. And then just some back of house stuff. We have storage for employees, and then a little like kitchenette area, seats, and then we also have our office and safe, which are going to be controlled access, and that's going to be where we store money and product. Additionally, we're going to use the existing garage for deliveries. We have a great relationship with our landlord, and they said that they'd be more than happy to let us use the garage for deliveries. And that's pretty much it. Thank you.
And do you want to stay up there with reference, if you want to talk us through some of the security measures that you plan and have in place?
I don't think I need the...
Okay,
mic
come on.
for it.
No.
Thank you. Just hit it.
I'll just leave it, that's fine.
When you say the garage is for deliveries,
Mhm.
what does it you mean?
So essentially just inventory. Anytime we need a bulk delivery of inventory for products, or say delivering our cash to a bank, that we would use the garage to have a more kind of controlled delivery area so that it's not open and everybody can kind of see what's going on with delivery.
So it's not that you'll be delivering
Correct.
product
Yes, correct.
to people, and that's not the purpose?
No, yes, we're not applying for a delivery license here, or, yeah, just products for the store.
And that's where it's going to come in?
Yes.
Through the garage?
Yes.
Is it coming through the garage, or are you pulling into the garage
That
and
is
then
a-
unloading?
That's a better way of saying it, yes. We're pulling, the car will pull into the garage, and then the garage door will close, and then deliveries would happen.
It will be a car rather than, for example, a small van or truck?
I couldn't tell you the specifics of the vehicle that we'd be delivering.
Well, I'm just concerned about the width of the
Right,
garage and
okay.
the height. That's
So, is it possible, is it logical to assume that if you have a delivery vehicle that's coming, that it's not going to be able to get into the garage, they're going to have to offload outside of the
Yes,
garage door?
Correct.
How big is the garage?
I couldn't give you the exact square footage, but I'm sure Frank could.
Okay.
Is the garage included in your lease?
So, no, it's not included in the lease agreement, but the landlord has verbally said that we'll be able to use that.
Does any other tenant in the property have access to the garage or a similar verbal agreement?
No, not to my knowledge.
Who are the other tenants? Is there an upstairs tenant?
To my knowledge, there's an upstairs tenant.
An
and
apartment?
I believe so, yeah, and then to the right is that paper store.
You don't know who's up,
I have not met the person,
but it's an apartment.
to my
Yeah.
knowledge. I'm sorry.
Is it or isn't it? Like, to your knowledge, does that mean yes, it is an apartment? Or
I'm saying I haven't been in the apartment, I couldn't speak on it, is kind of what I'm saying.
It is residential
Yes.
upstairs,
Okay.
yes.
Sorry.
I don't know that he's met the tenant personally, so
Oh,
I
I'm
think
just
he's being
wondering.
careful, yeah.
You're just confirming that it is a residential unit.
Yes.
I just
Yeah.
want to pin down my colleague, Mr. Neiman's question. He asked whether any other tenants had access to the garage. You first said no, and then you said not to my knowledge. Is it no, or is it not to your knowledge?
No,
You've asked, and you know that to be true.
yes.
Thank you.
Do you anticipate that you will have a written agreement with the landlord for the use of the garage at any point?
It's controlled by, the garage is controlled solely by the landlord. So I would advise them to get an amendment to the lease if that is what's been agreed to. But there's certainly no impediment to an agreement verbally, but I would advise that they get that in writing. But it has been confirmed that they will have use of the garage.
Is the landlord occupying the upstairs apartment?
No.
I know from past applications, when they last redesigned that building, that was the owner's premises, that they lived above the flower shop. And it was just one unit that was up there. And we haven't had any applications to create two units up there, so I'm assuming that it's still just one unit
I believe so, yes.
upstairs.
And John, that's one unit over the two.
Right, actually,
two storefronts,
if I'm
right?
remembering correctly too, half of that, what you see, the lattice part, is not a fully enclosed, it's like a porch, it's like an open porch kind
Right.
of situation. So it was just one unit, and I think the owner would parked his car in that garage.
Do you have a copy of the planning report that was prepared? If you can turn to page 4. It looks to me like access to that garage is blocked by cars that park in the parking lot. So my question is, how can you use that garage for deliveries if the space in front is being used as parking?
So that would be, as far as, well, there's 3 parking spots with the lease.
Those 3 spaces are your spaces?
So no, there's three spaces, one for each tenant. I suppose the one that's blocking the garage is that would be our space. So for deliveries, we would just move the car that would be there and allow
But even so, I don't think you have enough room to even, because the garage door is facing where those cars are parked.
Right.
That space is 8.5 feet wide.
Mhm.
There's not enough space to actually pull a car into the garage. So,
I see what you're saying. Yeah, as I said before, we could just pull up next to the garage.
I think that's probably what you're gonna have to do. You're not
Yeah.
gonna be able to pull into the garage.
Yeah, that's totally okay.
But notwithstanding the fact that you cannot get a car or anything in there because it's being blocked, you will still have unfettered access and use of the garage. That's your understanding?
Correct.
That's a verbal understanding
Correct.
at this point?
Yes. And I just want to add that the landlord is also part owner of the Matt Gardner LLC as well.
And the garage access, thank you. The garage access, that's the only way into the back of house?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Moving on,
Well,
can
just-
you? Oh,
Pretty good security on the
Correct.
garage, if that's the only access to the
Yeah,
back.
so during deliveries, we would definitely have maybe extra security.
But not even during deliveries, just, you
Well,
know.
security, yes, definitely.
Yeah,
Well,
so.
why don't
We're
you
going to
speak-
kind of get into that.
Why don't you
Okay, you'll
speak
get
to
in- okay.
security now?
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
I can wait whenever you.
We're
Well,
ready-
that's actually
ready to
that's
go.
the next thing we were going to talk about.
All
anyway,
right.
So perfect. So yeah, security measures in general. Modern cannabis security is a combination of technology and personnel. So state-of-the-art technology is going to include panoramic cameras, video monitoring stations, temperature sensors, glass break sensors, intrusion sensors, keypads, card readers, panic buttons, smoke fire, and heat detectors. Our security plans were developed by cannabis security consultants, and we will have on-site security that's vetted through the Department of Law and Public Safety. Additionally, there will always be one security guard on the premise at all times during opening, closing, and regular business hours.
Which are, what are your?
9:30 to 9:30, 9:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m. are
7 days a week?
Yeah, proposed, and may be amended based on community feedback.
Sorry, are you required to have security, a person on site at all times by the state regulations? Is that why you do that?
That I'm not quite sure of. I think we just do it just to make sure that we have all of our bases covered and that our people are protected, and so is the store.
And it's from 9 in the morning until 9 in the evening?
9:30 to 9:30.
Thank you, sorry.
No problem.
So I apologize. You said it and I missed it. You said there's going to be one security guard on duty?
At least one security guard at all times during
And-
opening, closing, and regular business hours.
And for deliveries, what's the plan, what's the specific, I mean, if you're going to get into it, don't let me interrupt you, but I'm interested in how you're going to handle security for the deliveries, especially because it looks like you're not going to be able to pull a vehicle inside the premises, so there's going to be some.
Yes. So we haven't exactly worked out a security delivery plan, but that is something we intend to do.
And is the delivery, does it take place before business hours, during business hours, after business hours, or maybe you haven't worked that out yet?
Again, we haven't really
Okay.
delved into the specifics of delivery, but personally, I do think that it is a better idea to have it done before customers are on the premise.
The safe looks relatively small. How frequently do you expect to get deliveries?
I would say, again, I can't speak on how frequently we would have deliveries. I think that would depend on how much cash we have and how, if we needed inventory or not.
Save the money, not the product.
It's for both, actually, yeah.
Big is the safe? You just said it was kind of small.
Just,
Yeah.
just looking at the plan, it doesn't seem huge, so.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, okay. Yep. Mhm.
Will your architect know the answer to that question?
I don't know if they would know the exact size of the safe, but they would know the dimensions of the space where we could put safes.
So it's a real safe? It's a
Yes.
metal safe? It's not
Yes.
just a heavily locked door? It's an actual safe?
With 30 square feet. So
30 square feet?
Yeah.
Metal safe?
Mhm.
Okay.
Will it be from the Acme Safe Company?
Yeah, Bugs Bunny's coming in. All right, should we? Oh,
Okay,
sorry.
we'll see if the
Okay.
board has any more security questions. Do you have any?
I do.
Go
Is
ahead.
it, do you have to have an appointment to go to the store, or do you take walk-ins?
We take walk.
Oh, you do? Mhm.
I think we would offer a appointment system if somebody, if somebody knew what they wanted and want to kind of hold items online, we would allow that service.
But it's not by appointment, so
No,
people
it's not by
get a rush of people before a concert at Wellmont,
Mhm.
and then you have
Yes.
to deal with it, yeah. Okay.
And we're hoping that that reception area will kind of avoid any spillover on the street. Excuse me?
What are you basing your hope on?
Just,
Well, in terms of the layout, perhaps.
the layout, yeah, so we just kind of modeled similar cannabis stores, like in town and across the nation.
Have you operated any cannabis stores? Do you operate any cannabis stores elsewhere in the state?
Yes, not in this state, no.
Where?
California, we have retail stores.
Okay.
And that's just members of our team. That's
Mhm.
not Mad Gardner LLC.
I see. You know, was any comparison done between, how the business operates in California and how you would expect it to operate in New Jersey?
Yeah, exactly. So we worked with consultants and our architect to develop a floor plan that is based on trends of the industry across the nation, and what you usually need in a floor plan for cannabis is kind of how we crafted it.
How many people does the waiting room hold?
I think if you look at the floor plans, there's like 7 or 6 chairs. Do we have it on here? 7 chairs, so at a minimum 7.
And and how many people would you allow in the store at one time versus
So
number
we
of people in
haven't-
the waiting room?
We haven't worked out the exact
Oh.
numbers yet.
Okay, Counselor, you have further questions?
In terms of odor control, are there any measures taken to address that?
Yes, so we're going to be using an industry specialized system that's considered a gold standard across all cannabis operations. That includes cultivation and any other cannabis operation. And so what this does is it provides effective odor control to remove any cannabis odor from the area, and even further the property line. So nobody on the property line will smell any cannabis, have any notion that there's a whiff of cannabis in the air. And further, the odor will be monitored through the township, or by the township's requirements on an annual basis through contractors picked by the township.
In terms of diversion control, can you speak to that?
Yeah, so to adhere to state regulations, we're gonna implement proper inventory control. Our inventory control system is gonna be audited, monitored, and maintained regularly. And then additionally, our inventory audits are gonna happen no less than once a month. And that's gonna track all cannabis on the premise, which includes adulterated, damaged, and essentially non-sellable cannabis. And then additionally, any visitors that enter the store will have ID badges with restricted access.
What do you do with the leftover cannabis?
It's a very
You
involved
smoke it.
system that involves informing the CRC and essentially following their guidelines.
So it's disposed of somehow or other?
Yes, they have, the Cannabis Regulatory Commission has like strict guidelines on how to handle cannabis waste and damaged and defective cannabis.
Oh, do you know, I'm just curious,
Yeah.
what is that?
Speak to, do you know?
At the top of my head, I know that involves contacting them, having essentially a record of all damaged cannabis, and I think you even need to send it to them, so we can't dispose of it on the premise ourselves.
Is it, do you regularly have like leftover cannabis that needs to be disposed of?
I can't speak on that,
Okay.
I hope not.
This is all new to us, so.
Yes,
I'm just
I
asking.
appreciate any questions.
Now,
Are there state standards for delivery?
For delivery in what?
For your delivery, like if you, are there, for your license, are there standards you have to comply with for your deliveries?
And are you saying like us delivering to people?
No,
or-
deliver to your establishment.
I don't believe so.
So in the license for the state, there are no compliances?
They haven't released them yet, so.
Well,
So
right,
maybe,
so we were
do we
asking about
need
the
a,
garage, that's what reason.
do we need another witness in order to answer that question, Counsel?
No, my understanding is the applicant will comply with any and all state requirements when it comes to delivery or any other matter. And I will, it's your understanding that until you receive that state licensing
Yes.
and local licensing, which involves testimony and proofs as to all of the matters you're raising tonight, you will not be operating at all out of that facility for this use.
Correct.
That's a good question.
Yeah, the
Can
only-
you drive
well,
up in a
the-
VW
right.
Bug?
The only
or,
reason
you
I'm
know?
asking that is we already see a restriction with the garage somewhat.
Mhm.
I mean, and that's, it's not on paper, but that's not part of
Right.
your lease. So if you have to comply with some state regulation, that's
Mhm.
another hurdle. that
Yes.
You'll have to,
Yeah.
okay.
And we will comply with any and all state regulations.
Well, it's not whether you would, I mean, whether you could.
Well, as it stands, there is no regulations or requirements, so there's nothing to adhere to.
So your application is pending with the state, is that also true?
So.
The state and the town?
Not quite, actually.
Oh.
So the license that we're going for is called an annual license, and to follow state, state laws, we have to get township approval first. And so part of that is coming here, getting site control, applying to the town. So after we get our township approval, we will then go to the state. I know this is different than what you guys have heard about the conditional licenses, where people have kind of come here with a conditional license. And the difference is that we don't have to transfer our license to an annual. All conditional licenses will eventually have to transfer over to that annual license. And the reason we like to do it this way is because it shows that we have the site control. We're going through the town first, because the township approval is really what matters. And then when we get to the state, it should be pretty straightforward. It's essentially the same application for the township and the state.
And you currently have an application pending before the governing body, who is the designated
In Montclair.
agency to approve or disapprove those applications.
Yes.
Are you looking for any other kind of license other than a retail store?
Just the class 5.
So there's like 7 people, I guess, applying for licenses within the town?
I heard that
And you're
today
one of
as well,
7,
yeah.
okay.
And I heard there's also a couple cultivators looking.
One more question. If the safe was brought up, if you're gonna, I mean, if you're expecting a certain amount of business and looking at the size of the safe, how often do you think you're gonna be getting deliveries? If you're gonna make a comparison to your site in California, if you're looking at that same traffic and you have, what, 30 square feet
Mhm.
of
For the
storage?
safe.
For the safe, how often do you think you'll have to have deliveries to that location?
So I would probably say a couple times a week. But again, that would be,
So if you're, I'm saying, for square footage, or how much business you're expecting and the size, looking to business model, do you have a number of how many times you expect to be getting deliveries a week?
I would say like 2 or 3 times.
So 2 or 3 deliveries a week?
Yeah.
Can I just confirm that all sales will occur in the proposed retail area only?
Correct.
So, for example, if somebody pulls up in a car in the VW Beetle, will one of your employees go out to do a transaction on the street?
No.
What about in the garage, if somebody pulls up in the garage?
No. Just at the POS counter, where they get their second point of ID verification.
Turning to the specific ordinance provisions, in Chapter 347, 17.21, will any of the operations include or constitute home operation?
No.
Will any of the operations be housed in a vehicle or any movable or mobile structure?
No.
Is the primary entrance to the site closer than 250 feet from the primary entrance of the nearest pre-existing public or private K-12 school or child care facility?
No. And our architect, Frank, will provide some more exhibits to really show you guys that we are out of the buffer zone.
Now, turning to the planner's report dated August 24th, 2022, you reviewed that, sir?
Yes.
Okay. And on page 4, it notes that the site is located in the Montclair Center Historic District. Have you appeared before the HPC?
Yes.
And will you return upon approval for a certificate of appropriateness from the HPC?
Yes.
Page 7 states some planning considerations. Will the windows be transparent?
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about the waiting room partition.
Yes, so the windows will be transparent. We won't need to put up any like paper on that front partition. And the reason is because we're gonna have a waiting room with almost like a barrier between the retail front and the reception area. So from the outside, it should just look like a nice boutique waiting area, which would reflect the nice boutique shops around it.
And on page 4, it shows that open dumpster. Page 7 of the planning report requires that be enclosed. Will comply with that proposed condition if approved?
Yes, we will comply with that ordinance.
And finally, for the record, do you agree that Matt Gardner is prohibited from operating a cannabis facility at the location unless and until all state and local licenses are granted, regardless of the board's determination tonight on this application for conditional use approval?
Yes.
I have nothing further of Mr. Gunderson. If there's any more questions, he'll be here, obviously, if you'd like to speak to him again.
Any other questions from the board?
I do. So you're relying upon access to that garage for your delivery?
No.
Yeah, I thought you just said that.
Well, that's the plan, yeah, but
Yeah,
we're
yeah.
not. I mean, as it stands, we're relying on it, yes.
I mean, that's part of your application before us.
We have another owner here. Maybe
Okay.
we could swear him in and he
Sure.
can answer that more clearly. You think that would work?
I mean, maybe I'm misunderstanding, that's why.
Do you know this more clearly? Sure, come on. Do you want to finish up with any other, or we'll bring him back in?
You know what, just go ahead and swear them in.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
We can talk to them both at the same time.
Okay, here.
Well, you could step up to the lectern
Yeah.
Yeah,
Come
yeah,
on.
perfect.
and just make sure the light's on, please.
Thank you.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
My full name is Carter Stephen Prince, and I am an owner of Mad Gardner LLC.
Is it S-T-E-V-E?
P-H. No, our delivery plan is not contingent upon the garage, nor is that a requirement. Many cannabis businesses deliver straight through the front door, and there's no rules against that. We have access to this garage, and we thought that it could be utilized to our benefit and to the benefit of the township of Montclair if we can deliver it through the back. But there's no, we are not required to do so.
I know, I mean, I gather from your testimony that your intent is to use the garage to, if you can, pull a truck, a car, whatever, inside the garage and do your delivery.
Our plan is not contingent upon that, since
Okay.
that's not a requirement.
That's fine.
Or in the state.
I
guidelines.
have a very practical question. What do you do with snow and extend your deliveries then? If you can't use the garage because of snow or something? That was my question, but you're saying that you have other backup plan.
Right, we would.
You
if-
just
if-
deliver to the front,
if-
yeah.
You're saying if the garage is frozen shut and we couldn't
No,
open it?
no, if there's snow in the parking lot, you have a heavy snowfall.
If
and
there's
you
no,
can't-
if there's so much snow that there's no access to the parking lot at all,
Yeah.
we would be able to deliver through the front door like.
Okay, all right,
like
thank you.
Another cannabis business, yeah.
Mhm.
But if it's, yeah.
Well, see, actually delivering in the front door does create concerns for us. Of course, have you investigated where your, if there are any delivery zone areas for the trucks to park in front of the store? I mean, I know that there's metered parking, but I'm not sure whether there's any, and I'm just trying to see on Google Maps now, whether there's any, whether there's a loading zone in front of that store, because certainly you don't want to have your truck parked down the street. You're kind of in a unique situation here, though, because you've got the municipal parking lot next to you, but we don't want you to tie up circulation in the parking lot either. So this is why it's always good to have a fully fleshed out plan so that you can tell us, you know, how you're going to deal with exigencies and, you know, things that might come up in the, expected to come up in the normal course of your business. And that's kind of why we ask these questions, because it's just not, you're on a main business thoroughfare, you've got traffic, you've got parking, circulation, you have a number of different things to consider with respect to safety. And, you know, not to mention that, you know, with the type of product that you're carrying, the heightened need for security, and wanting to make sure that, you know, your operation is safe for you as well as the public.
Understood, yeah,
So,
of course.
Yeah. I know our regulation really doesn't require us to have all of these elements in place, but we still feel the need to highlight these issues, you know, in an expectation that you will, you know, take these things into consideration, because, again, you know, there are regulations and there are the minimal considerations, you know, that you may be required to have, but they may not address the problems that occur as your business is going. And then, you know, we would like nothing better than to have you not have problems further down the road, like, you know, we hear some of our neighboring towns are experiencing with these new businesses that are coming in terms of traffic congestion and, you know, issues with circulation and such. So, I mean, if you can lock down the rear for deliveries, you know, get it in writing. Otherwise, it's not worth the paper it's not written on. You know, and you know, always you want to make sure that you're not going to have problems with the authorities, with your neighbors, you know, and with the public. So, do any of the board members have other questions that they would like to ask of either of the owners? And certainly if the third owner, I assume you're the third owner?
I'm actually not an owner. I'm actually their consultant.
Okay.
I've worked actually on dozens of license applications, both municipally and statewide in New Jersey, but also have been basically doing this business for the greater part of half a decade at this point. So I'm basically focusing on compliance, getting the team's applications, but then also continue business advising through these processes. But I'm not an owner, no.
Okay. All right. So, any other questions? All right, Counselor, why don't we move on to your next witness?
Thank you, that's.
Oh, wait a minute, I'm sorry. There are at least two other people in the audience who I don't know whether they're public or not, but do you have, if you're public, do you have questions of the witnesses?
No, nothing at all.
Okay. All right. Then we can move on to the next witness.
Sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the record?
Sure, my name is Frank Cunha, C-U-N-H-A, the third. My business is FC3 Architecture Plus Design LLC.
Is the address of your business the address that's on the plans?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Cunha, could you give us a little background on your education?
I graduated from NJIT in 1998, and I graduated from Montclair State University with an MBA a few years ago.
And what are you licensed, registered architect?
I'm a registered architect. My first state was New Jersey, and since I've been licensed in 11 states.
And are you a member of any professional organizations?
I belong to the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, as well as NCARB, which is another architects organization.
And can you tell us a little bit about your experience?
I have a lot of experience in architecture, probably over 20 years. I served as the university architect at Montclair State University for 14 years. I've been in business for myself since 2005, and I've worked on tons of projects from residential, commercial, mixed use, all sorts of things. Currently doing a lot of work in Jersey City as well.
And have you testified and qualified as an expert before any other boards previously?
Yes, I've qualified through various boards throughout the state.
Okay. Offer Mr. Cunha as an expert in architecture?
We'll accept him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't you describe the site?
Okay. Test. So as previously stated, some of this might be a little repetitive, but as previously stated, the site's in a C1 Central Business District. The project is also located in the Town Center Historic District. The project is a two-story commercial building. Let me see if I can grab that picture. So for those of you who may not be familiar with this site, it is in a historic district. My client's store is actually the store on the left there, which is currently vacant. The store on the right is a gift shop. And then, as we know, there's an attached one-story garage at the rear of the site. I'll get into the square footage in a bit. There's currently 3 parking spots within the property, one of which will be designated for our client. There's a large municipal lot located west and south of the property, and there's a large parking deck to the west, as well as metered parking on Bloomfield Avenue. The project consists of a new shop, approximately 1,950 square feet if you count the garage. The proposed use is a cannabis establishment. The project's use of cannabis establishment is governed by section 347-17.2 of the Zoning Ordinance. We did do a buffer analysis. We actually triple-checked ourselves. We're trying to be really conservative. So I did an analysis, which I'll go through. The client's planner, they actually hired a planner, Calker & Calker LLC, who also provided an analysis, as well as the town's planner. So we kind of triple-checked it, and we believe that we're in compliance. Just going to scroll to the appropriate sheet. So we were asked to look at the entrance to a local daycare facility. We actually checked with the town, and we got a list of all the daycares. Our planner also did a walkthrough of the entire 250-foot radius of the site. So as a scientific method, we went on this website, Calc Maps, as well as Google, and we drew the radius. Sorry, this is going a little bit too fast. So we did the analysis two ways, one as the crow flies, and then one actually walking the site, which our planner also did. So when we measured it, we were over 400 feet to the closest daycare, which is right here. Sorry, it's been a while. I don't remember the name of the daycare. But I can pull up the planner, I believe, that identified the daycare being Early Explorers Child Care Center. So they're way beyond the 250 foot buffer requirement. So I think that answers the buffer issue. As for the parking, like we previously stated, there's a parking garage as well as the public parking adjacent to the structure. There is an existing dumpster which will be enclosed. I think working through some of the things you brought up with the deliveries, I think I would suggest to my client using their parking spot as the drop-off zone. So the neighboring tenant, I believe they come in at 8 or 9 o'clock. So I think we can arrange for any deliveries to be made before the parking situation takes place, which would allow my tenant to utilize the garage. So I think from an operational standpoint, we can solve that very good question that was raised. And then secondarily, we can also add another garage door on the other face of the garage if we needed to. Architects can be crafty and find solutions. So if that was something that we needed to do, we'd be able to do that as well. Currently, there's a pickup truck in there, so it's a pretty substantial garage. We do have the dimension. Just pardon me here. That's why the slideshow would have been a little bit easier. So the garage is 15 feet wide by 25 feet deep, which is approximately just under 400 square feet. As far as the actual project, my client already reviewed it, but I'll review it from an architectural standpoint. The existing space is just being completely gutted for the most part. It's really antiquated, doesn't really have any ADA considerations, like the bathroom is way too small, so we're basically just taking it all down and basically redoing it. As far as the layout, there's an existing vestibule, which is about 40 square feet down on this side. And working with the security consultant, they really feel like this flow is a better flow where you have the customers come in one direction and then leave out the other direction. And that's the reason for putting a second entrance on the facade. And just for the record, we've actually designed a few of these. We've been hired to look at some different sites. So we've kind of established a rhythm and a pattern in terms of establishing the layouts. For each site, we have to, sorry for lack of a better word, but finagle, the layout. But we're kind of tweaking this layout as a reiteration of previous sites that we've looked at. So although this is new to us in the state, we have looked at various sites, so it's a little bit of a different exercise for us, if you will. The reception area is approximately 165 square feet, seats about 7. We are adding a proposed barrier-free restroom, which is about 60 square feet, which will serve the public as well as the management. The retail space is approximately 740 square feet. The back of house in its entirety is about 500 square feet. We're proposing a kitchenette for the staff, a modest kitchenette and a little storage area, which can also be used as a safe if we had to. The office with the safe is about 150 square feet. And the existing garage, which has become part of the project, adds another 365 feet. Getting into I don't know how much you want to hear about the historic nature of the project, but we have met with the historic board, and they found the application, well, I don't want to speak for them, but they took no exception other than they'd like for us to reuse the limestone So where we open up the opening in the Bloomfield Avenue facade, they're asking us to take the limestone that we're taking out there and actually use that limestone to create the, what they're calling the bulkhead or the windowsill for where this glass would turn the corner. There is this beautiful cornice, which is part of this application. Once approved, we're working with the landlord to actually clean that facade. Getting into signage, but before I get into signage, I would like to testify that we did look at various code sections of the historic code. Sorry, I'm being a little clunky here, but I was hoping to have a PowerPoint. We did look at the historic guidelines, specifically 2.0, commercial building types and architectural styles, 3.0, rehabilitation guidelines for commercial properties, 3.2, primary materials, 3.4, architectural details, 4.0, guidelines for signs, 6.0, rehabilitation guidelines for residential properties. We did look at the zoning ordinance, chapter 11.56 of the zoning, which talks about the historic considerations. We have met with the Historic Preservation Commission, and we will be responding to their review comments, recommendations, and feedback as part of our application process. So looking at the facade of the building, this is the existing as it is today, and this is a rendition of what we're proposing, which is basically to cut away this one glass unit and making that a new entrance on that side there. As far as signage, we're looking to comply with the local ordinance, which states in chapter 11.72, for businesses not within a shopping center, we're allowed a maximum aggregate sign area permitted under subsections A1 and A2 of the section not to exceed 1 square foot per linear foot, which we're not. So basically, we're basically putting back the sign that's there now, just with the new words, new logos, and the idea there is to comply with a wooden type sign. And when we present to the historic board, we've already drawn new elevations, which indicate that, as well as the sign. We're using gooseneck lighting, which is pretty traditional and standard for Main Street. So we're looking at keeping the facade context as much as keep it as appropriate as possible for the context of the neighborhood.
So I have a question. Does the building have a basement that you have access to?
It does have a basement. It's not part of my design scope. I don't believe it's written into the lease agreement. I'd like my client to testify to that. It's not part of the lease, right? I know there's verbals.
We haven't. It's shared. Access to the basement is shared with the tenant next door, so we wouldn't be able to use it for anything cannabis related or operational.
How do you get to the basement? Is it, do you have a?
Both of us have, both us and the tenant,
Next door?
the gift shop, both have doors.
You both have access
We
to
both
that
have doors
basement?
that lead into a hallway that leads into the basement.
There's an adjoining vestibule, which both tenants have access to, that take you down to the basement. Quite honestly, besides drawing it, we haven't really talked about the basement. It's not really part of this project.
Mhm.
Yeah, we would have a locked door that would block it off.
How high is the garage? What is the open?
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer to that. I don't want to lie on their oath, so I really rather, I know that there's a skylight. It's about 10 feet tall. 8 or 9 foot garage door, but I don't have that specifically on my plans.
When you testified that
Your mic's not on.
When you testified that the landlord, there was one space designated for your client.
Yes.
Does that mean the landlord has assigned parking, or you're just going to use the garage as your
No,
space?
there's three parking spots within the property, within the limit of the property. I actually parked my car there for one of these meetings for the historic board.
You're talking about 3 outside.
Three outside parking spots, plus the garage.
So
The garage not counting as a parking spot. Let me see if I can pull that up. So Bloomfield Avenue being to the top of the page, I was gonna try to reorient it, but I can't rotate it. So this being Bloomfield Avenue, and this being the garage, the dumpster's right here. This is where they're parking one car right now, and they're parking 2 cars this way. So within the boundaries of the site, they're able to situate 3 vehicles there. They're not striped. They're not striped spots, but they
Yeah.
are being used as 3 parking spots.
I guess I'm a little confused, because I am looking at figure 5 in Ms. Talley's report on page 4. And it's not clear to me. It looks to me as if there are 2 cars parked there.
There's another, they're using that area in front of the,
I have it.
in front of the dumpster.
Uh-huh.
They're using that to park a vehicle there.
Oh, I see.
In the area there that's foreshortened, along the face of the garage there, the long face of the garage, they use that as a parking spot as well.
I see.
So is that the third space then?
That's the
Yeah.
third space.
So there's 2 spaces that are, let's call it perpendicular to the entrance of the garage?
Correct.
And then there's one that is alongside of the garage in front of the dumpster?
Yes, sir. So I think if there was a logistics issue with dropping off into the garage, I would recommend to my client to possibly switch parking spots and create a new entrance door to the garage from the side. If they didn't need to actually pull in a vehicle, they can use that as their receiving area.
Where does the door go that's alongside the garage door?
I'm sorry, sir?
There's a person door, it looks like, right next to
That's
the
actually
garage
for-
door?
That's actually for the tenant upstairs. That's their access in and out.
So that goes upstairs?
Correct.
Okay.
And that eats away a little bit into the garage. But there's a pickup truck in there right now, so it's a pretty decent size.
The seating area, do you have any estimate about how many people are going to be coursing through the facility and how long each person should be in there or will be in there?
I think I'd rather my client speak about the operations standpoint. You have to get sworn in.
Swear in. That's fine. This is my job, so I might as well.
Sir,
He wants to-
Let's use that.
sir, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Would you please state your full name and business affiliation for the
Adam
record?
Michael Dalton, and that's Dalton. My business affiliation is 3C Consulting LLC, who has been hired by Mad Gardner LLC.
Where is 3D Consulting located, sir?
It is based out of Denver, Colorado. Oh yes, 3C, not 3D. 3C, sorry about that. So to answer your question, with a dispensary in a location that is obviously in a community of this size, given the license caps as well as what we've seen in other states that have similar adult use cannabis markets, generally speaking, peak hours would be anywhere from 12 to 15 people. But that being said, given the floor plan and also given the waiting room, that would be able to accommodate that number of people under ordinary business circumstances during peak hours. And basically our research is based on adult use dispensaries in established markets such as California, Colorado, and other established adult use cannabis markets. Given this store's roughly 1,500 square foot footprint and roughly 11 to 1,200 minus the garage and also the what is it called? The secured access areas that the general public will actually have access to. This is definitely going to be obviously a retail-oriented dispensary. But given our studies, the waiting room is of adequate size to address issues of peak clientele under normal business operations.
So does that mean that you're going to permit a certain number of people into the retail area, and those who, if you achieve that number, those who are waiting to get there will wait in the waiting room? Is that it?
Exactly, yes, correct.
I don't think you answered the question. How long do you expect people to stay in the facility?
To stay in the facility?
Yeah.
So basically, to stay in the facility, it generally will vary per person. I mean, they will offer the ability to do like pre-order pickup, so that person will obviously come in, leave almost immediately.
Mm-hmm.
There might be someone who, quite frankly, has never been in a cannabis store, and that person might spend some time wandering around the store. That person could take up to, maybe 15 minutes, but I would say the average person, given the smaller size of this store overall, would not spend more than 10 minutes in the store, and 10 would be high. I mean, 5 would be fairly, and I'm speaking more specifically in the retail space, just in the area with product.
Have you spent any time looking at the existing cannabis businesses in Montclair?
Absolutely, and I am very aware of the situations with the existing cannabis businesses in Montclair, yes.
So how has that impacted your view of how many people you expect to be in the waiting area at any given time?
So that has impacted my view, but then again, obviously the city is offering licensure to 2 additional adult use recreational dispensaries. I mean, currently there are high demands because there's only 22 licensed basically former medical, still medical, but then have been allowed to convert to adult use. But then something to consider with that is that not only is Montclair adding 2, but then adjacent municipalities, many of them who have absolutely no dispensaries whatsoever, are also adding adult use dispensaries, therefore adding some of the pressure off of the individual stores owing to the increase in the geospatial basically proliferation of stores around the area. But I am aware of the issues at the current licensed dispensary.
Just to follow up on that, I think there's only one town adjacent to Montclair that has dispensaries, and that's Bloomfield. Is that correct?
West Orange, yep, and
has
East.
one? Where is West Orange's? Is it in, it's away?
They have 4.
They have 4.
4.
Oh, okay, anybody else? Proposed? Yeah, proposed 4.
Proposed 4,
And the other
correct.
towns other than Bloomfield and West Orange?
Bloomfield, West.
Clifton, Verona?
Not yet, but then
Cedar
even
Grove.
even not like immediately adjacent, but also East Orange. So there are other.
That's pretty far.
It's fair enough.
Okay, thank you.
Good, yeah.
So when you say that at peak hours, the space in the waiting room and in the retail area is sufficient to handle the peak expected clientele, will it be packed to the gills then, or will it be so that you could probably handle a little bit more?
It's set up so that it could possibly handle a little bit more. Obviously, we're not designing the space so that we are constantly at max capacity or are going to be reaching max capacity regularly. Obviously, being sensitive of the current issues with the existing operator, we're doing our best given this spatial and obviously functional and historic functions of the building in the permitted zoning area to facilitate a space that will not quote unquote be packed to the gills regularly.
I see on page 6 and page 8 you have the line, the distance from the establishment to the preschool. How did you determine that again?
Let's see here.
Either, page 6 or page 8. Because when I'm looking at it, it seems like it's you're doing it from the front entrance, and it doesn't look like you're doing from property line corner to property line corner.
It wants us to do it, I'm sorry, it was a while ago when I did this, but I think they want to do it from front door to front door.
Front door to front door is state, not property.
That's
line?
local.
Okay.
Local is more restrictive than state zoning.
Okay.
So
not
local
it's-
is front door to front door?
Correct.
Front door to front door. Okay, thank you.
I had two questions. The first of which is the point of sale counter. It appears to be open to the side, which is also the side where there's the accessible to the public restroom. What sort of security is going to be in place to make sure someone doesn't just slip around the side there?
We're actually still in the middle of designing this, so I think one of the options is to put a flip counter here. I think it's something that hasn't really been fully flushed out at this point. I think the drawings were submitted before I could really take a finite look at that. But from a security standpoint, I think putting that corner there probably makes some sense.
Okay. And then, as it's Bloomfield Avenue, busy street, a lot of traffic, what sort of provisions are you going to put for bikes or other alternative means of transportation, whether it's a bike rack out front or something in the garage for employees, customers, et cetera?
I think, based on my conversations with my client, I think they'd be open to suggestions. If you feel that that's something that's needed, I think they'd be willing to amend the application to include those features.
Or agree to a condition.
Or agree to a condition.
Anything taking cars off the street is good.
I think they're amicable to that.
Maybe I missed this, but how many employees will you have at one time working there? During your busy hours or whatever? 7 to 8.
7 to 8.
Plus a
including the
security
manager.
guard, you said.
Including the security guard and the manager.
Thank you.
So how many of those will be bud tenders?
I only gave him so many stools. I think there's only 4 stools, so. Am I right? Okay, I got that one right, 4. I'm learning too.
Is the security guard from a security service? Is that what you planned, or?
As I stated earlier, they would be vetted through it would be any companies that are vetted through the Department of Law and Public Safety.
Oh, okay, thank you.
No problem. Appreciate it. All the questions. All right.
First of all, do you have any further questions that you wanted to get on the record, Counselor?
I do not.
Okay. Are there any further questions from members of the board? Okay, and then we have one member of the public here. Of any of the witnesses who have contributed to this, do you have anything you'd like to ask? No. Okay. All right. You have any other witnesses you're going to present?
I do not. And I would just wrap up by saying that thank you for your.
Just one more
Oh, sure.
question. Do you send an announcement, I forget, to within 200 people, owners within 200 feet? of the-
Yes.
Okay.
We submitted our affidavit of mailing and publication.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Just wrapping it up to say that tonight, we appreciate all the questions of the board and take into account all of the feedback. It would be quite helpful, frankly, in our local licensing hearings, so we appreciate it tremendously. We believe that the testimony and the proofs presented do establish that we comply with the town's conditional use ordinance. We meet all of the conditions for approval, and we thank the board for their consideration.
Member of the public, do you wish to make any comment about the application?
Not about this application.
Okay. All right. So I guess the hearing is closed and testimony part is closed. And I think based on what you've presented, Counselor, and based on what your clients have testified to, it seems that you meet the requirements from the township and that we should approve this application. The one thing that I would recommend is that you guys really pay attention to security. The other applications that we've had have been a bit more detailed, I think, in what they presented to us in terms of how they intend to control and control the flow of customers. And, because of the nature of the business and the exposure, that, the security is a focus, that is not only for your client's benefit, for the public's benefit. It needs emphasis. And we're not so sure, I'm not so sure from what I've heard, that, I know it hasn't been fleshed out, but what you've stated so far, I think there's some loopholes there that need to be addressed or need to be paid attention to. Shared access in the basement was interesting. And other ways that you can get, because you've got the tenant situation here, which is a little bit unique than some of the other applications that we've seen. Because you've got a tenant, both commercial and a residential, who might have access, to some parts of the premises, that really needs to be something that's paid attention to. And again, we would encourage you to have bicycle storage facilities, for your customers, wherever it is most logical to put them on the premises. But that's my motion, is that we do approve this as meeting the minimum requirements for the application.
So I try not to disagree with our esteemed chair too often. I'm going to this time. My opposition to what Montclair is doing is a matter of record. That being said, I'm more than willing to do my job on the planning board without regard to my personal views on that subject when necessary. If our job is really just to go through a list of checkboxes and they meet the checkboxes, they're more than 250 feet from a daycare center. If that's really all we're doing here, then these hearings should be a lot shorter, and we shouldn't be doing what we're doing. I think that this application is not fully baked, and I think that my vote on this is going to be no, and I urge my colleagues to vote no, which is not without prejudice. If they want to come back with a more fully fleshed out plan for security and for access, I would be happy to entertain it at that time. But if it's just a question of checking boxes, okay. But I think that this is not ready for prime time, and I'm not in favor of it.
Well, did they say they're coming back for a site plan review?
We are not. We intend to follow the proper procedure and lay out all of those considerations in our license application to the council. Those are all properly before the mayor and council, not before this board. We wanted to focus our presentation simply on what is before this planning board, and that is whether we comply with the conditions in this conditional use ordinance. That is my understanding of our legal obligation tonight, and I believe that that's correct.
And quite frankly, I agree with the counselor for the applicant. Our role here is very limited, as it often is when we're put in the position of having to review whether or not something complies with a regulation or statute. This regulation is really bare bones. And we ask these questions. You're quite right. This hearing could have taken 10 minutes. But the reason why I ask questions, and I think the reason why other people on the board ask questions, is because we do want to get these things into the front brain lobes of the applicants, so that they will pay attention to them, and they will not just confront this when they get to the council to review for the license. That they will anticipate and understand, that concern is of the community, and it's not just a matter of the council reaching it, and the council is going to hear this too, and understand that these concerns are out there. So I think that's the reason why we ask a lot of these questions, and it also helps the public understand what's going on. So, for what it's worth, that I agree with you that their plans there's, I won't say half-baked, maybe it's 60% baked, but there's open issues, and they acknowledge that. They haven't looked at things, and they're waiting. I understand too that they're waiting for certain things to develop. I'm hoping that our regulatory system is such that once they, in order for them to get their licenses, that all of these things will have to be fleshed out, sufficiently, in order to be able to actually open up and operate.
And if it helps, we do have a very detailed plan. We submitted it to this board as an appendix to the application. We didn't get into it again because we don't believe it's really before the board, but for information. And our application was deemed complete immediately as to security issues and other measures. So we're part of the applicants that are going to be before the council, and we'll have to answer to all of those questions, good, bad, or indifferent.
So there's a motion on the, anybody else have any comment regarding the motion, or do we have a second?
I'll second it then.
Any further discussion? Oh, then Janice?
You want me to
take a
call the
vote?
roll?
Yeah, we let's do that.
Okay. Mr. Ian Wally,
Yes.
Ms. Lockman,
Yes.
Mr. Ortiz,
Yes.
Mr. Pierre,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
No.
Mr. Neiman,
Yes.
and I know I already have Keith as a yes.
Yes.
John as a yes.
Well, I just moved it to a vote, but I
I
just
just
second
made
that
the
we should,
motion.
yeah,
All right.
but yes, I say yes.
Okay.
All right, well, wish you much success. We want you to be successful, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you. Okay, we have a couple of ordinances that have been referred to us by the council.
Yes. We have two ordinances. The first one is Ordinance 22-23. And this ordinance came as a direct request from a council member who was concerned that we did not have appropriate safeguards in all of our residential zone districts to reduce the impacts of development, and essentially the suggestion was that we put in or establish maximum impervious coverage standards in our residential zone districts. It happens to be consistent with many of the recommendations in our master plan. Staff took did an evaluation based on GIS mapping of what is the actual impervious coverage average in our different residential districts. And we then took a deeper dive in that, because in some of our residential districts, particularly our R1, there's a wide variety of lot sizes. So we broke it down by lot sizes and came up with what is the average impervious coverage for lots of different sizes. Planning is much easier when you have GIS in your hands. So if you look on table 2 of the memo, the cover memo for the ordinance, you can see what the results of that analysis is. And so the proposed maximum impervious coverage for each of those districts really mimics what the existing conditions are, the average existing conditions are for each of those zone districts. So if you look at the cover memo, we do reference the fact that this is a direct recommendation in the 2007 conservation element of the master plan. It's also a recommendation in the re-examination report that we did a couple years ago. So I don't know if there's any comments. I know, Tony, you have some comments.
Okay, so it was in 2007 and also later. I did photocopy some other aspects of recent developments that we've done to affect drainage. And the most kind of aggressive, or the most complete one, was done in early 2021, where any impervious surface of 250 square feet or more has to meet a very high standard. And if you look at the first page of what I put out, so this is anything. It doesn't matter where it is, what zone. So it's a rather It doesn't say that there can't be it, but you've got to take, for each square foot of new impervious surface, 2 gallons be managed by green infrastructure and so forth. And it means that it has to be retained on the property, not just detained in a short period of time. So that covers everything, and 250 feet is rather small. And I think that when the master plan looked for impervious surface limits, this provision didn't exist. So this has a lot of impact, and this is where I think that certain aspects of our code need to be looked at to see how they interplay with one another. Also, in the same 2007 report, there was a call for doing, take a special look at steep slopes. And that was done, and that's the second provision. So if you, and also, what I just mentioned, the 250 square feet, it applies, and I believe it trumps anything that's in the steep slope ordinance, because there's no area limitation of where that first provision of 250 is. But nonetheless, there's still a provision, and it's 200 square feet in steep slopes. And that, if you go to the circled.
Let me ask you, why was that different? Why would it be different?
Well, I think what happens is that we do something in a period of time, and we do something else.
Oh, it wasn't intentional?
No, I think that
okay.
the steep slopes has been there for a while.
Okay.
But the standard of approval isn't to retain the water on site, it's just to detain it. So, Marissa, you might be able to check my rationale on this, but the overlaying one that we just did in 21 is more aggressive in that it says you have to retain that water on site. The one on steep slope says you retain it for a period of time and you slow the flow. So if you're doing something in steep slopes, if that's more than 250, I think that what we just did is more serious, where it's more complete than the one that was done in 2007. So that's, I just wanted to kind of point that out, because if we just say there's no more impervious surface, then the next question is, what do we do if someone puts impervious surface down in within these limitations, but it's the effect of that is eliminated because they're doing green infrastructure? How do you count that toward the limitation? So if you're simultaneously doing some patio work or an extra building, and you apply green infrastructure to that, shouldn't that be deducted from what the maximum is? Because it shouldn't really be considered in the same way as just putting something down. So I wanted us to consider that.
You're losing me, okay?
I think what
yeah.
Tony is saying is a good
Yeah.
point. And basically, what he's saying is that the
Yeah.
two existing statutes that we have
Right.
Require certain limitations and requirements, but they don't, with what we're proposing new, it doesn't necessarily mean that all three of these things can work together to give you a clear answer about what you're supposed to be doing. So all three of them really have to be analyzed together to make sure that they work together and they don't conflict. And I don't understand it as deeply as Tony does.
That's
but
part of the problem.
I do
Yeah,
appreciate
we need an
example if you-
example. Like, what if somebody builds a large shed on their
But
property?
what if they built a large shed on a steep slope
On a
property?
street slope, exactly.
And is the point that we're trying to give people credit for doing good stuff?
Yeah.
Or, okay.
Yeah, and if
Right.
you
That
just-
I got.
And we don't want there to be a conflict that says that
Yeah.
they have to do this good stuff, but then they have to meet this other
Maximum, yeah.
retention thing that is more than what they really need to do.
Right.
Because they're doing the good stuff.
Yeah, because they can't, according to what we did, they can't do anything, and 250 is pretty small.
Yeah.
They can't do anything without, retaining that water on site. So the limitations become a question of, well, if I do this good thing and I detain all this water, retain all the water on site, why am I then put up against a maximum when I'm actually improving the situation? And I think that the maximum was good when we did not have these other measures. So I think that we have to reconsider the fact that things change.
And maybe in addition to making an amendment or making a new ordinance, these have to be amended somehow.
Yeah.
Or there has to be some way for them to all
Yeah.
work together smoothly.
And then the other thing is that, this is just a question, the map, when there's a really complicated formula, you tell me you had a really exciting weekend when it wasn't much going on. You know, we have the GIS map, the zoning map has a line of demarcation for steep slope. And if you're a property owner, it's good to know that, you know, is that the official area? So if your home is in that area, does that regulate whether or not you have to go through all those calculations to determine if you have a steep slope or not? Because it is
Oh, if
shown
it's
on our
marked
mapping.
already, right. If
It's marked, so
already
that's
on the
just a
map.
question.
Yeah,
Because that would make it
yeah.
easier for when people come to us, oh, yeah, you're over here, that means
Right,
that you
right,
do
rather than
this.
there's a formula
Yeah.
built in here that they
It's
wouldn't
the
have
map
to do.
that
It's
tri-
the map
that
that trigger it.
triggers the
Right.
steep
Yeah.
slope
And
review.
if you go to the planning department office, they'll pull it up on the computer
Yeah,
and
so,
say,
yeah,
here's
you're
where
in,
you
you don't
are,
have to
here
go
are all
through- yeah.
the attributes such as steep
Right.
slope, here's your zoning.
What if you happen to be in an area of a hill and, you know, it's not a street slope designation, but it might be a slope?
Well,
And
that's
then
where
you
there's
go
a-
through those calculations.
Then there's a conflict there. So I think
Yeah.
if we have a steep slope, if we have a designated steep slope area that somehow references the zone, it should be operative. Otherwise, there's no purpose of that. There's no purpose of mapping that if in my opinion, if it doesn't tie back to something that's operable in zoning.
Well, I'm
Well, I
sure
think it
it's
does. It's an
it's
overlay.
operable, is the topography.
Okay, well
Yeah.
then maybe we should reference that, instead of the code saying, go through all these calculations, just say, if you're in this zone, then this applies. But think about this, it doesn't really matter, because no matter where you are, if you're at 250, which is only 50 feet more than the 200 that's in steep slope, you're gonna get caught in what we just did in 21. So if you're doing a garage, which is much larger than 250, all this doesn't matter, because you're gonna have to retain water for anything that you do over 250.
Can I take a step back? What the maximum impervious coverage limitation does do is it definitely preserves open space. It preserves green space, which the 250 square foot trigger for storm has nothing to do with preservation of green space on a property.
Okay, but this is put forth in the context of drainage and runoff, though it's not being put forth with respect to open space.
Well, I think that the two are very closely related.
But it's kind of hidden in this
Well,
ordinance.
I guess
Is that what you're
I
saying?
guess maybe
Yeah.
to what Tony is saying is that if it's going to be in this section, then there needs to be some sort of cross-reference, so that you know that you have to look at these other sections, you know, that you may have to look at these other sections. And
Absolutely.
you shouldn't have to like guess, or you shouldn't have to read everything to figure out, well, maybe I should be looking at something else. You should be pointed to these other sections, and we have to make sure that all of the sections mesh together. Because, and it's hard when you're drafting or amending one section in 1 year, and then maybe 2 years later you do something else, and then 3 years later you do something else, and nobody really thinks about whether or not there was something else that's on the book that this might clash until it comes before us,
Right.
and we're like, well, what does this mean, or how are we supposed to interpret that, you know? And we've all seen it,
Yeah.
you know, and not only in this context, in other contexts, so.
And I have just two more quick points. I think that for the small lots, you're only allowing a little bit more, if you look at those small lots.
The table?
Yeah, the table. It would be good to look at what the effect is, because we have a lot of zoning requirements that don't really, I mean, there's the side yard setback, front, rear, and so forth, and if you want a driveway. I think the small lots are punished a little bit more than the large lots, because if someone wants a little patio on a small lot, it would be good to look at those small lots in context. And when you look at stuff over the averages, there's no cause and effect. I mean, just because everything up to 7,500 has this average, there might be perfectly livable properties that are at 60% and they can't. But anyway, that's just more of a, because we really don't know how much drainage this is really going to solve. We're looking at these averages, but I don't know what the effect is. I know what the effect is what we did with the 250 square feet. That has a really definite effect, because you've got to retain that water on site, which is, you know, a lot more important than, like, for example, if someone if that provision didn't exist, that 250 square feet, if you have a 15,000-foot lot, you can put a lot more, going from 25 to 35. If this just existed on its own, you could put tons of impervious surface with no obligation to retain that water. So I think that what
Well,
we did
except that they both work together. That's
Well, I'm saying if the 250 didn't exist.
Right.
Yeah, then you might need something that just regulates impervious if you didn't have methodologies to retain the water. Okay, so then my last thing is, and I looked at a bunch of different towns that have these ordinances, and the last one is mainly just a calculation. If you do a kind of a step up the size of lots, on the back page I put a copy of the Allendale, New Jersey code that has it. Theirs is pretty simple. It says for lots less than 10,000 square feet, you get 55%. Over 40,000, you get 27.5%. But in between, they just use a simple square root formula where you take 55 and divide it by the square feet of the area, and it creates this very even table that decreases slightly for each square foot that you add. So on the left, if you look at what, for example, if you take a lot of 7,500 feet, the second line in my table, at 50%, you get 3,750 square feet of impervious surface. If you add one more square foot, you drop down to 40 and you only get 3,000. So that's unfair to the person who just has one more square foot. So I think Allendale's formula works really well. If this were structured like the tax code, where you pay 25% of your income, and then for the incremental, you get more, you never wind up, having this kind of, this stair step. So anyway, that's it. And then I watch a football game. No, I just. I had a beer.
I agree with Tony's point, for sure, in regards to kind of graduating those distinctions. I think to his point about the smaller lots being punished, just for some context, if you were to go from the average existing impervious under 7,500 square feet to the maximum of 50%, you'd get about 277 square feet to play with. That's not a lot of space, whereas if you were doing so in a lot over 15,000 square feet, with the about 10% there, you're looking at close to 1,500 square feet of added impervious coverage.
I also thought about the ADUs that might be coming down the pike.
Yeah.
So if people put on ADUs, they'll be in, my guess is that they're going to be all over town, but the ADUs may bump up against this,
And I think there's kind of a density is good argument in the case of something like an ADU, where best planning principles say you want to concentrate your development, right? And that may mean more intensive use of space in certain areas to then preserve the less improved space in other areas. Now, Montclair being a relatively small constrained community, you can only do so much, right? But I think allowing for greater concentration in certain areas is going to help us prevent further kind of sprawling outgrowth in more outlying areas, especially when considering something like the three-story apartment zone, which is a pretty intense use, and maybe allowing them to be a bit more intense will prevent us from having to have more intense uses further afar of the central zone, which would improve long-term water management.
So I think that if we're just really speaking about drainage, I think that what we have right now, the 250, is relatively small, and you've got to do anything over 250 or 250 or more, you need to be green. I mean, that's pretty good.
Unless you can't. Like
Unless the
that's
soil
only
doesn't
out,
percolate.
I mean, if you're
right.
fully clay and on bedrock and you just can't.
But you still may be able to
Use a rain barrel.
You still may be able to
You can
just
do some,
retain
but
it.
not-
Oh, I'm sorry, just detain it for a little bit.
Yeah.
Time it so that
Right.
it doesn't go out as fast,
Right.
which is in the spirit of the steep slope thing.
Correct.
Yeah, you can either, recharge, or if you can't recharge, then you detain and controlled release.
Right.
Matching existing conditions. May I say something about this whole discussion? Oh, sorry. Push, there we go. So, impervious coverage maximums, they're extremely common for residential zones and other zones. They're one of the pieces that helps control how much impervious you're covering this site with. If you put in more than 250 square feet of increased impervious, you have to provide stormwater management. If you do not then consider that coverage in the overall coverage, technically someone can just cover their entire lot because you have no maximum, and every time they've added, they've provided stormwater management, and you're saying, well, since you provided stormwater management, this area doesn't count in coverage of your lot.
Well, but
And
there's
I
setbacks,
think
there's
that can
backyard
get-
setbacks, it's not, we don't, I think that we've got maximum building area, so that's not entirely.
But I can pave
There's-
my entire property
Right.
and make it parking as long as there's no parking in the front, but I could pave the whole lot. In the extreme, I mean.
Yes,
And
it's just
I don't feel like-
Atypically, but-
I don't
stretches
feel like
that
doing lawn care.
concept.
It happens.
Just put down.
Well, yeah.
That's what people
actually one
do.
reason I
That's
would
what
like to
people do. There's a house on
something
Walnut
similar.
Street, they've done that. They put gravel and fake turf.
They do.
On the property, and it looks awful,
Mhm.
but there's nothing against it, right?
Right.
There's no
But that-
ordinance against
But
that.
that gravel's probably permeable.
It probably
right?
is permeable, yeah, and so is probably the artificial turf, but,
Yeah.
No,
but
I
there's.
don't think turf's
Well, I don't
not-
know. Is artificial turf?
Depends on.
No,
No,
it's
Yeah.
not, it's not permeable.
Yeah, well, I don't know, I'm just,
Yeah.
but I'm just
It's not
saying, there's
like-
no prohibition against that,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
I think is pretty outrageous, but which brings me to the point, there is, on page 3, there's something that's Xed out there on number A. It says for single and two-family dwellings, gravel may be used instead of hard surface paving for parkage area and driving aisles. So does that mean gravel may not be used for those?
The problem with gravel, in my understanding, is that it comes loose and gets
Spills,
stuck in
yeah.
storm drains and
Yeah,
stuff like
yeah.
that, so it's actually less advantageous.
Yeah, so are you prohibiting gravel by taking that out? I mean, I hope you are.
We're taking gravel out.
So there's no gravel allowed now for single and two-family dwellings?
That's
Gravel may be
no,
used,
this is
so-
in there right now. The
Yeah, they may
proposal
not
is
be
to-
using, they may not use gravel anymore
Right.
for those kinds of things, but that doesn't prohibit it from being used on your front lawn, which somebody has done.
Or landscape.
Or landscaping, yeah.
I would say the way to address that problem is to address that problem, not to kind of back end into it through impervious coverage requirement.
Oh, absolutely, I just brought it up because this is deleted from your ordinance, and I was just, and you started talking about it, so I'm just asking the question, basically.
Yeah, I think the issue with gravel has always been that it
Spills.
washes out,
Mhm.
it clogs our storm drains.
Right.
And so, yes, while it is a partially permeable product, I think that all the recommendations have been to not encourage, even on 1 and 2 to use gravel because of that concern. What we did do is we did add pervious paving, allowing this,
Mhm.
which wasn't in there before, and really is a perfectly good alternative.
Just back to the gravel for a second.
Yeah.
In the instance that I'm talking about, the home actually has a slope where they put the gravel. So the gravel spills onto the sidewalk and into the sewer, but that would not be prohibited in this because you're
No,
just
it-
talking about driveways and aisles.
Because if somebody uses, we don't control what they use for landscaping, and if they're using gravel for landscaping, we don't have a limit on that.
Yeah. But the same problem that you're describing is occurring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, in view of comments, what do we do with this ordinance?
I mean, to me, overall, it's consistent with the master plan. It's consistent with the other recommendations that this body has made, but I like Tony's idea of looking at the Allendale zoning code with the graduations. Like, that rings, like, we should look at something like that for some of these.
So we should be, our job here is to get back to the council.
Mhm.
So this is what we need to be communicating back to the council. I know Janice has been taking copious notes.
I am.
Making references, I can see. So, if we're all in agreement, then, we can communicate this back, that this is good as far as it goes, but it needs to be improved. Go ahead, Tony.
I think that looking at the small lots, I think that we might be punishing them a little bit, because they're really close to, again, there's some small lots that are probably right now over their non-conforming. So, looking like Allendale's got 55, they're up to 55%, a little bit more ultimate maximums than the 50%. for the small lots, so, you know, maybe consider that, and maybe boost it up to the 10,000, like, because 10,000 foot lot's not that big a lot, and you're still at, you know, 55%. And also, fundamentally, I know we have a problem with drainage, because people talk about that a lot, but I haven't really heard people talk about, we have like too many lots that are fully paved, because most people have lawns and grasses, and so, I don't know, I think that the origin of this issue was really drainage, wasn't it? It wasn't necessarily, that's the context in which it's been, the context in which it's being presented now is a drainage issue.
Because that's what we have
Yeah,
most of the
look at
problem,
Yeah.
because,
Right.
because of
All
our
the
topography,
warehouses,
we have adjoining lots being affected by adjoining lots because water is
Yeah,
running
it's
off
all
and
water,
flooding.
yeah,
and,
that's
you know, it's
that's
not-
how I
it's
thought
not-
about it, yeah.
Not the full pavement.
Right.
But nonetheless, I think that if there is this upper limit, and let's say you're working with a smaller lot, that's getting kind of penalized because they don't really have much room, if it's only, you know, you say how much?
277.
217.
277.
Maybe to get credit for something that's green, so if they exceed the maximum, they can, you know, on that basis, or maybe there's some.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, because it would also encourage folks to be proactive about addressing it, much like how we incentivize electric vehicle chargers by eliminating an additional parking space. So I think that's a great addition to it as well.
I missed what you said for the incentive.
Well, if, let's say
But you might be able
someone,
to put a little more impervious space on, particularly on
small
smaller
lots,
lots.
yeah, because they don't have
If you
much
can
to-
demonstrate
yeah.
that you can, you know, put something green in to deal with the drainage issue so that it doesn't impact your
yeah,
adjoining properties.
you know, maybe consider moving the 50 up to 55 like Allendale, or just do a bit more of a study, because they have a little bit less of a margin than the
If they
larger.
provide detention
Right.
or retention or whatever. Again, I'm a little
You can
bit,
just
it's a
say
little
green
bit beyond me
infrastructure.
with the exact terminology in this area, but I get the general idea, you know, and I think it's a good idea.
And I think it'd be interesting also to understand too, like what percentage of properties would be now non-conforming? I think that's the other question I had, is that, you know, I appreciate the averages, and maybe this also gets to Tony's point about perhaps having for smaller properties, a higher maximum impervious surface. But that was one question I had, was just, so how many properties all of a sudden are non-conforming in this current setup, or even if we decide to do something, or the council decides to do something more along the lines of what Tony is pointing out with Allendale, what's the percent non-conforming, and how does that look?
Okay.
And I have just a suggested change to your third whereas. The first sentence is like, what is she talking about? You're saying Montclair stormwater management infrastructure does not effectively address stormwater where it falls. Why not say something similar to Montclair has an unaddressed need to address residential stormwater on-site runoff as it leads to problems of localized flooding? Something, it's just a little bit.
We have an unaddressed need to address.
I don't know, I know, right. I was struggling, I'm just struggling for the words, but but the gist of it is that what you have there is kind of not very clear.
Well, unfortunately, stormwater drainage is not very clear.
Yeah. But
As
everybody
those of us who've been
understands.
working on the climate change
Everybody
related
underst-
hazard vulnerability assessment.
People understand runoff from their property.
Yeah.
So stormwater management, what did you call it, infrastructure?
Does not effectively address stormwater
Rainfall.
at its origin. I don't know, stormwater.
Well, think about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yay.
So if there are no other comments, I will consolidate the board's comments in my report to the council and see what they decide. The next ordinance is 22.
Do we review that before it goes to the?
We have 35 days, so it's due November 7th. I think our next meeting's after that. So what I normally do is I draft it and I distribute it to John and Keith.
Would you share it with Tony,
And
too?
I'll share it with you, Tony.
Because since it was primarily a lot of your ideas there, I think it's better for him to look at it than me to look at it.
I can't tell if he's laughing, because he's got the mask on, so I can't tell if he's laughing under there or not.
It's one of the benefits.
It's hard, I just look in the eyes, I can't tell.
So the next ordinance is to amend the Montclair Center Gateway Phase 1 redevelopment plan to permit veterinary offices on the first floor for the portion of the building, the Valley and Bloom building that fronts on Bloomfield Avenue. We've had a vendor, Bond Vet, who's been trying for quite a while to find a location in our downtown where they can open up a veterinary office. I think this is their second or third location that they've looked at. So they've been working very closely with the council, because if it's a redevelopment area, they can't do it by use variance. We have to amend the redevelopment plan. They've provided photos. They do bond vets located in urban areas, in urban neighborhoods. So the photos that they supplied show that they design it as a storefront veterinary office. And I think the council felt that, the council members that I spoke to felt that this is a good use in our downtown, particularly since there is an increasing numbers of households with pets. So that's the proposal, is to make this very simple change. We did not allow medical offices on the first floor, just veterinary offices, if you see on page 2 of the draft ordinance.
So I have a question for you. So we already have, like, Cameron, that vet is on the first floor on Bloomfield Avenue?
That's the only one that's on Bloomfield
Right,
Avenue,
right.
and there's cats
That's,
and
but
dogs
that's
in
on
Upper
Glenfield.
Montclair.
Oh, but there's another one on Glenfield too, whatever the name of it is.
On Glenfield?
Yeah, Glenfield and
Oh,
North.
yes, there
North
is,
Willow.
there is,
Yeah.
yeah. By Forest.
So it seemed to me, if we're allowing it for one, we should allow it for the other.
Right.
Right.
Well, some of those were probably all use variances.
Well, that's what I was
Or they
gonna ask you.
pre-existed our zoning
Yeah.
ordinance.
Yeah. What is the downside to having a vet?
I don't think there's a downside to a vet. The reason we don't permit medical offices.
Yeah, I understand medical office. but,
So we didn't
yeah.
feel that there was a downside for a veterinary office. Because
I don't see a
generally-
big difference between the two, personally.
I don't think
What does
the
your kid look
animals are
like?
really concerned about privacy. You know, if it's a medical office, they almost always have the windows covered. But every veterinary office, like cats and dogs, the windows are open. You can see the animals inside the treatment rooms. And I think the same idea is here. You can see into it.
Maybe
Whereas-
you're more likely to go ahead and drop your pet off and then go walk someplace else and spend some
exactly.
money or something, as opposed to.
Whereas
if it
doctors'
was your
offices
kid.
don't work that way.
Help the animals.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, do we need a motion or something?
I don't need a motion, because
Oh.
this is really just a report.
another recommendation
If
to
you're
the
generally
board.
supportive, that's what my report to the council will be.
Yeah, I think I don't have a problem.
Okay.
Is there a concern for poo-poo?
You know, that issue did not come up.
But are there design guidelines in this redevelopment
There has to
plan?
be on-premises retention.
I guess.
In the gate.
Yeah, I mean, because for this operator, you know, they're okay with leaving the windows unfrosted and open, but what if
Absolutely.
another operator comes in?
That's it, the redevelopment plan and in fact, our zoning
So that-
ordinance
okay, I just wanna
requires
make
them to
sure
be
that there
open.
is-
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah. We have safeguards for that.
That's what I wanted to hear.
So, okay. And that is it, except for bills.
I reviewed the bills and I would move to approve them.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay.
I have one more point I forgot to make. I'm sorry. The only other thing is that it shouldn't matter whether it's RO, it should be all residential, because it's just the size of a lot that really operates.
I just like Allendale.
Yeah.
It's just the size of the
Because
lot.
I
hear
found some
you.
small lots in RO.
Right.
And they would be penalized. Okay, thank you.
I agree. I think it's an excellent idea, and I
Yeah.
appreciate the sample from Allendale. I have not seen that before. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
We have a member of the public here, if they have.
Were you here for a specific purpose?
Yes, I am.
Well, why don't you come up?
I'm certainly hoping to save you as long as I will. My concerns here about the master plan and some of the things that have come before the development board.
Okay, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me
Is
okay?
the light on?
Yes, it is.
Push it and see if it changes.
Does that change? Any better?
The button below.
There, now it's on.
Okay. Okay, now?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. Well, and actually, I had expected the mayor to be here because I was looking at his finance disclosure form, and he has indicated that he's the mayor of the town, but also on the...
Can we have your name?
Yes, my name is Carrie Dunn, and I'm a 15-year resident of Montclair.
Your last name is what?
Dunn, D-U-N-N.
Okay.
And, well, I'm only stating that because his financial disclosure form
Yeah.
indicates that he's the mayor, but also on the town planning board. So that was...
He is, but he has a designee sitting for him.
Mr.
Okay.
Pierre is his designee.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, so, the concerns that I have are some things that have all come before the planning board, and I certainly am not versed in things like stormwater drainage and the amount of impervious versus pervious, but I can tell you that I am concerned about stormwater drainage in the area in which I live. The parking garage, the central parking garage, that it's still not operable. One of the major holdups there was that there was a stormwater drainage problem, and that it was flowing, unfortunately, very, very closely or into the stream adjacent to that parking garage, which it flows directly into our drinking water in the Passaic River. And somehow that got cured at the very same time that the new restaurants, which were just given a new liquor license, at the very same time that happened, which seemed kind of suspect to me. So that was one issue. This is the same thing that happened with the ADA. This parking garage was constructed without any addressing of those issues. So the parking garage now sits there unused. Hopefully they're paving it with whatever slant it needs to be ADA compliant, but I am very concerned about that water storm drainage going into a stream that goes directly into the Passaic River.
Ms. Dunn, do you know that the planning board never reviewed a site plan for that parking garage?
I think that is a specific problem then.
Well, the planning board reviewed a concept plan, but because it's a township parking garage, it's not subject to planning board review for site plan approval. So the engineering drawings that we see for private applications, we don't see for township properties.
How then, can I ask you, how then did it pass this committee?
It doesn't pass this committee.
It didn't.
It's a product of the township engineering department, or whoever from the township is overseeing that construction project.
But is that not part
because
of-
it's a township project, it's not required to come to this board for site plan approval for any engineering drawings.
Okay, but
basically
if I
what
may
this
ask if it- is this-
basically what this board does, we hear applications for site plan approval, but it doesn't go to the level that you're talking about.
But what about the master plan, which is in line, supposed to be, from what I've read, in keeping with environmental?
So the master plan is a policy document.
Yeah.
Yes, that we do adopt. We hold hearings, we formulate the content of it, but it's a policy document. It's not something that we hold hearings about whether people are complying with it. Rather, it's used as a guide for things that are adopted, ordinances that would be adopted by the council, or for consideration when applications come before us for variances, which we are empowered to grant in certain circumstances.
Like for the ADA thing then?
We didn't see that either.
No.
Oh, you didn't see that?
That's it, that's not
That was
within
not a
the
variance?
that's not within the jurisdiction of this board.
Yeah.
Okay?
How about ADA compliance, though, in general? See, this is
We
where
don't
I'm misunderstanding.
we don't oversee ADA compliance, that's a building
That's
department
building
issue.
department.
But isn't that sort of a Montclair concern that we want to welcome people with disabilities into the town. What I'm, here, let me just tell
I
you
mean,
what, right off.
we
I
look at.
can't make it to every council meeting that addresses the things I'm concerned about. The environment, children, which is I have no problem with the people who presented to you all of their detailed thing of a cannabis, getting a cannabis license or whatever they needed to do with you. What I did have a grave concern about was that Ascend was giving 3 storefronts, and this was approved prior to them finding out, ma'am. Let me just finish this.
This
Can I
board
please
had
finish
no
this?
role in that.
You have no role in the fact that they changed after that after them getting their recreational license, expanding to 3 storefronts. They then went in and changed the school licensing zone from 1 mile, from dispensing drugs in 1 mile from a school to 250.
This board has
Perhaps I
involvement in
can,
that.
perhaps I can summarize, ma'am, Ms. Dunn, perhaps I can summarize it this way. The board has no enforcement capability. That's not what the board does. And most, if not all, of the things that you've raised as issues, and I think, look, we all live here, so we're concerned about it. But this board does not have the ability to enforce any aspect of that.
Of the master plan, then, you have
You know,
There's
what
no
you're-
enforcement of it.
This is not the master plan. Ascend and the cannabis facility is not a master plan issue.
The safety of school children is not?
I think
I'm an
you're
educator.
conflating. Yes, of course, with the safety of school children is a concern from a master plan perspective. When you dilute that to these specific issues, that's not within the jurisdiction of the planning board to address.
Okay, because let me say this also as well. Within that very school district, used to be school district.
We don't
which
even
was
have school.
changed.
We don't designate school districts.
Okay, but it was 1 mile. You were not allowed to sell drugs within 1 mile of the school. We are now permitted. I understand that school, they made their criteria for you. The products being sold are called school lunch and green crack. Let me say I have a medical marijuana license. I came to you because of the master plan. I don't know the details. When the gentleman was speaking, I couldn't believe how much he knew about impervious or pervious, and I certainly don't mean to undermine. I'm here saying I have grave concerns about Montclair deviating what our town was supposed to be about.
Ms. Dunn, your concerns are better said to the governing body, not to the planning board.
We're not a governing body.
Right.
Okay, so I did try to go to the governing body, and the time that I was going there, I have health issues. As I said, I cannot, and I'm sorry, ma'am, if I'm offending you. I am really sorry. What I'm talking to you about is I am a member of Montclair. I'm an educator, and selling green crack and school lunch in an area that is 250 feet from a school
We
seems to me
understand.
to be
But there's nothing we
an
can do
upset
about it.
We
to-
understand.
Okay.
That's, and it's a valid concern, and I don't mean to dismiss it. There's just nothing that this body can do. I mean, we can listen to you, but at the end of the day, there's nothing
We have no
else
more
that
power than
we don't-
you do
yeah.
How about demolition
to
of
influence that.
demolition of
No.
buildings as well, because like
No.
we now
No.
have the
No, we
mayor's
don't.
house being demolished.
But no, but we don't.
behind.
Like, that's not
So I
part
just
of our
go to
purview.
can you direct me then, because I just sat here for nothing, can you direct me to which board meetings I go for these things?
I would contact your ward representative, like
Your councilman.
who's your council person? What
Your
ward are
council
you
person.
in? Do you know?
I live on Forest Street, right by where that parking garage is.
I guess that's Third Ward,
That's
is that?
Third Ward.
Third Ward, probably.
it's Counselor
You could
Schwartz.
look it up on our website, what ward you're in. I would contact your counselor, and that would be
And
at
say
least.
that the water is being polluted.
But in general, I think the town council is,
Yes.
because they're the governing body, they're the ones who
Right.
pass
Okay.
the ordinances. I mean, like, we had ordinances come before us, but just asking for our opinion on them. The council is free to do, they're the only ones who can act on those. They can ignore what we say if they don't think that we have a good basis for what we're saying.
Well, I did think that the mayor, because it said in his his financial disclosure form, it said he was a member
Well,
of the
that's,
But he was
that's
at one
because the
time,
municipal
yeah,
land
yeah.
use laws of the state require,
Right, right.
set that requirement up.
Oh, okay.
And, you know, and we're not feeling that you're offending us. I mean, understand, we're making a special exception to talk to you because we don't normally hear people outside of hearings because that's not what we do.
It said public comment, though.
We don't have public.
No.
No,
We don't,
have
we
public-
only
No,
have
public
comment
comment
with respect to
on the
applications. Like
application.
when I asked you if you wanted to say something with respect
Sorry, I
to.
should have said. I
Yeah.
don't mind that what I heard from them was, it sounded to me like they were in keeping with the new law. I just found that the new law, there's ordinances being changed after the fact that these permits are being granted.
And the
Parking garage
council
is
is,
built.
the council is the only one who makes and changes and
All right.
passes
Yeah.
ordinances.
Well, I certainly apologize for taking your
No.
time.
No, not
No
at
problem.
all.
I'm concerned about I'm concerned about our town.
And that's a good
Simple
thing.
as that. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, everyone, I think we had a motion,
Did we approve the bills?
and we paid the
We did,
bills.
we paid bills.
So,
Especially that bill?
No, there was none of mine in there.
No, there wasn't. It was.
I got your bills yesterday.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
all right, everyone.